Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for today's webinar about the latest cybersecurity trends and key practical strategies that you could be putting in place to improve your security posture. We're very happy to have you all here, including our speakers and subject matter experts on the topic today. I'll be handing it over to Alvaro from the Auxis team, who will be moderating the panel today. But I wanted to welcome Michael from CISA, Jeffrey from our partner Black Kite, and Jose from our Auxis team. Some quick housekeeping items before we kick it off. You're going to notice that your lines are muted, but you have a question panel when you can start leaving all of your questions. There's also a chat section. So please feel free to jump in with your questions as we go through the discussion, and we're going to make sure to cover your questions throughout the presentation or also at the end. Also, I'm going to be polling questions live and sharing the results of your responses with the audience today. But yes, I think we can get started, and I'll hand it over to you, Alvaro.
Thank you, Fabi, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alvaro Prieto. I'll be the moderator, as Fabi mentioned. And in the formal introduction, I'm the co-founder here at Auxis and senior managing director. I've been leading the technology practice and our consulting and technology practice since the company's inception in 1997. A little bit about Auxis. We are the South Florida-based organization, headquartered here in South Florida. We started as a consulting firm back in the 90s, and a little bit after that, as a request of our clients, we start helping organizations with their outsourcing operations, starting the IT side of things. And then we have moved into other areas like business transformation, finance, as well as HR, among other services that we provide today, including automation, which is pretty hot these days. So being fortunate enough to be working with a lot of customers over the years. Prior to Auxis, I worked at PepsiCo, where I was leading the technology services and support for the Latin America region for PepsiCo. So, really excited to be here today. One thing about Auxis also that I mentioned that we have some delivery centers in Costa Rica, Colombia, and other supporting hubs in Guatemala and Mexico. So very much our nearshore provider services from Latin America to the US and other regions around the world. So really excited about and very fortunate to have a great panel, group of panelists today. I did a little bit of math, and I think all of us combined have over 120 years of experience in security, risk management, IT operations, and digital transformation. So with that said, maybe we can start with some introductions. So let me start with, perhaps let's start with Michael. So Michael, welcome to the webinar.
Thank you, Alvaro. Glad to be here. I'm Michael Hastings with DHS CISA, working here in South Florida as a cybersecurity advisor. The CISA's mission, the Critical Infrastructure Security Agency, is focused on identifying and getting ahead of cyber risk and providing resources and information to help our critical infrastructure partners defend against cyber attack. I've been in IT and IT security for about 20 years, working mostly in industry, private industry for most of my career, and I've been with CISA for about 5 years, covering South Florida. Glad to be here, and thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Jeffrey?
Yeah, so I am Jeffrey Wheatman. I am a Senior Vice President Cyber Risk Strategist, which is a totally made up title over at Black Kite. Essentially, I have spent the last 25 years as a strategic advisor for security leaders, cybersecurity executives. In the last 3 years, I've been focusing on addressing and solving third-party risk, vendor risk, supply chain risk management from a cyber perspective. I've been doing this for a long time, and I think it is the hardest problem that we have ever had to solve. At Black Kite, and as Alvaro and Fabi mentioned, we're a partner of Auxis. We provide the intelligence that essentially makes third-party risk management, cyber risk management, bigger, better, faster, more. And I'm really, really excited to be here. And Michael, I want to thank you for your service to our country. I know it's you guys are in a tough role these days with all of the bad actors that are global coming after us.
Yes, thank you, Jeffrey. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Jose?
Yes, thank you. My name is Jose Alvarez. I'm the managing director for Auxis. I've been with the organization for over 18 years, and I have about 35 years of experience in managing IT, including security infrastructure and user support. I'm based in South Florida, and I work for organizations like Siemens, AT&T, Citibank, providing them services on the back end, on the infrastructure, security in the most recent years. Thank you for having me on the panel.
Great. Thank you, Jose, and thank you all. So we have a little bit of an agenda. So what we wanted to do today was really discuss some of what's going on really on the cyberspace. We have some interesting statistics to share with you, and then we're going to cover some of the very latest report from Black Kite on ransomware, which I find it very interesting, and some really good topics there for us to discuss. And then we go look into some of the gaps and some of the things that we recommend that you should be looking for to enhance your security posture, which we believe is one of the top priorities today for most of the IT professionals and cyber professionals in the industry. So before we dive in, let's discuss some of these numbers. And yeah, as you can see, I mean, this is not a typo, I would say, from when you look at the cyber crime costs, which are just rampant these days. I was doing some math, and I think this 10.5 trillion in cyber costs today is an exorbitant number. Of course, I mean it's one of the probably is larger than most of the economies in the world. I think it's probably number three would be the third economy in the world as far as GDP and so it is increasing. Obviously, it's rampant. The threat actors are just becoming. This is becoming a major industry for threat actors out there, and the numbers continue to grow as far as the number of attacks that we're seeing these days. Um, you look at the average cost of breach, which is really devastating as far as when this happens to any organization, it continues to grow. I mean, this $4.8 million that we have as an average is a global average. They actually in the U.S. Today is double that, so it's almost 9 million per incident according to the latest reports. And like I mentioned, I mean, when you have these kind of attacks, it's really devastating for a lot of the mid-sized companies, especially that are not really prepared to handle these type of events. So what we wanted to do really is, share with you obviously some of the things that you should be looking for to really enforce your security posture and really hopefully, implement some of these recommendations as you go through your journey in the cyberspace. The other thing that is really becoming very mind-boggling is the increase in the phishing attacks. I mean, this is all due to ChatGPT and different generative AI, where you find some very sophisticated attacks. I don't know if you've been part of that, but or have experienced that. But it's very difficult these days to really differentiate between an old phishing kind of technique that we used to see to what we actually are dealing with today, which are extremely well put together social engineering in some cases with chatbots or even with voice bots, as well as obviously your typical emails that still so many people are falling, falling for that. So the increase is not going to stop. I mean, as AI become even more sophisticated and more mature, and I truly say, and I say this to everyone, I think is we're in the very early ages of AI, right? Even though it's been around, but we're in the early stages of that technology. So it's going to get really interesting and very difficult to handle. But that's what we are in the industry for, right? And the last thing is really the number of attacks per second, which is again mind-boggling. You have these organizations around the world that are really creating these very sophisticated scanning techniques to go look for vulnerabilities and open holes, if you will, or open doors in organizations. And as they find these type of vulnerabilities, they typically take that information and they put it out there for people to buy that and the criminals so they can actually go and create their attacks. So all the what this has resulted is on having, as is shown here, 1.7 billion, oops, sorry about that, 1.7 billion tokens that are spread out there on the dark web. And to make things worse, when we have what we've seen, at least from our own perspective, is really where when you have organizations that have these kind of attacks, what always happens is that they typically don't have the people sometimes to defend themselves, and sometimes and most of the time, once they are attacked, to actually recover from these attacks. So as you see here, I mean, over 50% of organizations today are really dealing with, the shortage that exists today in the cyber space. I don't know if anyone here in the panel have any additional thoughts on these statistics, but perhaps Jeffrey, I know you have quite a bit of uh, say about
Yeah,
these things.
I
Let me see
want to
what.
add about the last topic about the resources. I mean, but although this is super important to have 24 by 7 eyes on what's happening with your security posture and alerts and all these things, there are a combination of things, obviously. It's not just to have the eyes, but to have the right skill to address these type of alerts and the monitoring. But besides that, as you mentioned, with the automation, people is no longer the only issue here. We're now looking into having the right set of balances, people having the right tooling for us to detect and having the right processes. So it's a combination of things that makes your security posture better than anything. But obviously, we do see, and I, especially as I deal with different type of clients, I do see how they are lacking of mostly a lot of people just to watch and have the coverage that they need.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I'd also like to add something. When we talk about the number of organizations that are sort of unprepared and really struggling with the human capital, what people don't always think about, the vast majority of companies out there are mid-sized enterprises, small and medium businesses that just don't have the budget, right? It's if a company's given the choice between getting a product out and hiring a cyber person, we all know where they're gonna go. And there are lots of big companies out there, and they're doing a pretty good job for the most part. But the smaller companies that are struggling, and then there are dependencies, the bigger companies depend on the smaller ones. So when the smaller
mm,
companies struggle, that impact cascades. So it's a huge challenge for really the global economy out there right now.
yeah. I mean, and I
Yes,
think Michael. Right?
yes, I agree. And, with the level of sophistication out there, not to mention the cost that if an organization's unprepared, could literally put some organizations out of business. And that's where I think really our partnerships with what we're doing today, the information sharing, the best practices, can go a long way to leveraging, that shortfall maybe of in-house staff. What are my partners doing? What are my friends doing? What are my peers doing? And we can learn, rather than trying to reinvent the wheel, so to speak, in some cases.
Yeah, yeah. I agree. I mean, I think that obviously the criminals know the vulnerabilities that exist out there and the opportunity that is out there. It is really incredible sometimes to see when we as a consulting organization and as a service provider, when we go into organizations for the first time, whether they typically are looking for our services. It's incredible to see sometimes the amount of open holes and vulnerabilities that these companies didn't know even that they have. That's why you have companies like Black Kite with their technology that they can actually scan these kind of things and identify all these things fairly quickly. But they just don't have the technology, and sometimes they just again the lack of resources really drives a tremendous risk for these companies. And when they get attacked, is game over. I mean, at that point, it's just reacting to an attack could take sometimes up to a year to handle, depending on the scope of the attacks. So it just grabs everybody into this kind of in responding to something like this, and it really can take, as you mentioned, Michael, a business completely out of the picture, right? Which has happened many times before. So what we want to do today, obviously, is discuss the gaps that we're seeing out there, some of the solutions that we see out there, and also even some an interesting reference framework for you to look into and perhaps compare your organization to that and see where you are and what you can do about to increase your posture. So one of the things that I would say one of the most uh, difficult things that are out there that happen as a result of these attacks is obviously ransomware, right? And Black Kite has put together a very comprehensive and really good report as far as what is going on this on ransomware these days. This is something they publish every year, and as you could probably see, there's obviously grow on ransomware everywhere. And so I wanted to have Jeffrey from Black Kite really walk us through some of the findings of this report, and then we can have some discussions about that.
Yeah, so thanks, Alvaro. I love to talk about this report. It's a piece of research that we're really proud of. We've been doing it for a number of years, and there are a lot of ransomware reports out there, but most of them are sort of survey based. So tell us, were you hit with ransomware this year? Did you pay the ransom? How much did you pay? And you always have to take that stuff with a grain of salt. But because we gather so much data, we're able to do an analysis not just of the ransomware attacks that were successful, but we're able to map that to the controls that people have, or in many cases, do not have. So we're really proud of this, and we think the data has a lot of efficacy there. And some of the things that Alvaro already talked about, and Jose and Michael, are that the smaller companies are the ones that are being victimized, and they're the ones that, number one, they don't necessarily have the ability to defend themselves, and number two, they're going to pay the ransom because they just want to get back up and running. At the end of 2023, when all of the stuff was going on with Russia and Ukraine, we saw a downtick in ransomware, and a lot of pundits out there said, "Oh, we're good, we've seen it," and we know that's not the case, and we've seen that is exactly the opposite. And Alvaro, you talked in particular about AI and deepfakes is making a lot of this stuff much easier for the bad actors, and the defenders are always chasing, right? We just don't have the same resources. We have ethics and morals that the bad actors don't have. So it's really been a challenge. We've also seen that the demands for ransomware, the bad actors have sort of figured out how to price themselves, and you can negotiate with them. I mean, these ransomware gangs are run like companies. Ransomware, it accounted for 2/3 of the third-party breaches, and if you took a look at the Verizon data breach investigation report, they've indicated that 30% of all incidents were third-party related, which was up from 15% the year before. That's double. I mean, think about the impact there. We're seeing a lot of US-based organizations are being targeted, and I think that's in part because a lot of the technology and the global companies are headquartered here, but other areas, Latin America is not exempt from this, Europe is not exempt from this. And I'll just share one quick story because it's actually come back in the news. So about 2 years ago, a company called KNP Logistics, a 156-year-old logistics company in the UK, got hit with ransomware. And in 45 days, they went into receivership, and then they went out of business. And you say, well, that stinks for them. And it does. But you know who it really stunk for? Anyone that was waiting for raw materials to show up on a KNP truck, or anyone who is waiting for a KMP truck to come and pick up material to ship to stores. These are the cascading failures that people are just not paying enough attention to. And we really need to start not just to look at ourselves, but look at our partners. And Michael, I'm sure, has some really interesting stuff, because one of the things that CISA does is they're monitoring critical infrastructure. And these critical infrastructures are critical dependencies for so many organizations. And I'll share one last thing. In the bottom left corner, one of the things that we've seen is that companies that are getting hit are now getting hit more than once. And the gap between the first time they're victimized and the second time is closing. Why is that? Because the ransomware gangs are talking to each other. And they're saying, hey, company XYZ, they stink at cyber, and they're going to write you a check. So go after them. And that's just going to get worse over time. If you don't fix things after the fact, the bad actors are going to keep coming after you.
Yeah.
Excellent. Excellent points there. Just to add on quickly, there's also some information on, you mentioned, how do these actors work? Where do they get their information? So they are talking to each other. There's pre-ransomware groups that will get in through phishing. They'll get in through compromising passwords. They'll map networks, gather intelligence, and then sell it to the ransomware actors to launch the strike. So that's, some of the workings behind that. And the other thing is, some organizations are saying, well, they're not going to go after us. We're not $100 million company. We're not that big. We're not on their radar. That's completely not true. If they can get that $100,000 hit, that $50,000 hit times 10, now it's $1 million. So those are some of the things going through their mind. And just one more quick point on targeted industries with professional services. We're seeing a lot of law firms get hit, real estate companies, especially real estate brokerage companies and law firms, their customer list, the private data that goes back and forth between their clients, all of that is extremely valuable, and they know that organizations will pay to get it back. So just a couple more thoughts on that.
I always say that bad actors are like water, right? They seek the easiest way, and the easiest way is to go after, to Michael's point, companies that have traditionally not really focused on cybersecurity. And law firms are a great example, Michael, because I always joke, if the cyber leader goes to the head of the law firm, one of the partners, and says, hey, we need $1 million for cyber, the partner is going to say, well, I could give you that money, or here's an idea, I could go buy myself another car. Well, what do you think they're going to do? They're going to go buy the car because they don't understand the impact. And some of what we need to do, and that's why these venues are so important, and what companies like Auxis does are so important, and what CISA does is communicating to people. Just because you're small doesn't mean they're not going to come after you. Just because you're small, just because you're in an industry historically that has not been targeted, doesn't mean you are exempt. And you can't just sit back and wait, because companies like KMP Logistics, we think we're going to start seeing more companies go under when they get hit with these attacks, because they just can't recover.
Yeah.
Exactly.
One thing that I want to add on this is the extensive use of AI, like Alvaro mentioned earlier today, which is becoming obviously everywhere, and not only from attacking, but also from defending. So obviously you have to use AI to defend against AI, but the deployment of these new tools will help you on something like, hackers right now are doing generated malware and adaptive ransomware. And this is really important because this is something that changes based on responses and all that. And that's what the new tools are more about: unusual behavior, adaptive, and all these type of things. They're not as flat and as steady like it used to be. So these are important for organizations, that they need to protect themselves. They need to be within the technologies of these days, hopefully to address this type of issues, especially with all this AI that is being introduced.
Yeah. Yeah, and one more thing about ransomware that is very interesting is really this concept of called ransomware as a service, which is, if we look at software as a service, right, you think of software provider delivering some platform so people to use and pay as they go. Is the same thing is happening now with ransomware, where these threat actors are leveraging these platforms where they can subscribe to the ransomware platform would basically create the attack and do the penetration, and then provides basically the credentials for a threat actor to actually take the attack on and make the attack, and then claim the ransom. So it's not that it used to be where you have these hackers, if you will, out there writing code and creating their own scripts to do their attacks. Now they don't even have to do that. So let's say someone without really ransomware experience can basically leverage these platforms and become pretty efficient at it by leveraging these platforms that are out there on the dark web. So it is mind-boggling when you think about it, because as this industry continues to, I would call it industry, but as that continues to grow, as we all know in technology, the cost of the ransomware platforms is going to be smaller, right? You're going to be able to get your point of entry is going to be much easier, your barrier of entry. So it is crazy. Now, another thing that it's interesting to discuss is really what happens after a ransomware, right? Once you get, let's say that as we discussed, some for example, the leak of PII data, for example, they talk about these law firms or real estate companies that get attacked. Once the organization sees that you have, let's say, I don't know, whatever, let's say, call a number, 5,000, names with phone numbers and so on, something that is protected obviously in the U.S. and anywhere in the world, for in most cases, um, that information, right, it gets published potentially to a TLS or data leak site, where they can actually, you as a company can go and see your own data being exposed out there on the dark web, and they can obviously sell that data if we don't pay the ransomware. That's the whole idea. Um, so, once you have that kind of situation, most organizations don't understand the regulatory requirements that they have to comply with, to notify the states, to notify the attorney generals in those states about that kind of situation. So if they avoid that from happening, there's obviously fines, and there's different things that can affect the organization even further. And it's incredible to think that a lot of the companies today are not aware of those kind of things. So, it's super important to be obviously educated, as that's what we're doing these webinars, talk about that, and really start putting the proper defenses in place, right? So you don't become the next victim, right? Um, so, with that said, I mean, I think we can, I don't know if, I think we talk enough about ransomware. I think what we want to maybe move into is more about how we can potentially, what is really happening, why organizations are becoming vulnerable, what they're not doing, and what they're becoming, exposed to the risk out there. So if you're interested in downloading the report, I mean, you can, do the QR code here, but you can also go to the Black Kite site. Also, we can have it available in our website as well for download if you're interested. But highly recommend that you really take the time to download it and check it out, right? Um, so we have a polling question. I think, Fabiana, we have a polling question
Yes,
there.
I'm going to share and launch the poll now. So, which trends do you believe will most disrupt your cybersecurity strategy in 2025? You can select more than one, or the one that you feel is the most important one. Um, so, if you can start including your votes, I'll share the results live in some seconds. Which one would you answer, Jeffrey?
I think AI is probably going to be the biggest challenge. I mean, people are looking like, what does AI do for new? Yes, there are new kinds of attacks, but really, as Alvaro and Jose pointed out, AI has enabled the bad actors to be much, much faster. And that is what we're getting caught flat-footed with. And I actually jumped off. We're doing a product roadmap discussion at Black Kite today, and one of the things that we're talking about really is the fact that there's a ton of AI out there that's being used that people don't even know is being used. right? It's in your vendor platforms. They're not telling you, they don't necessarily even know. That is translating into business impact. And then, of course, every vendor says they're using AI, and then the defenders have to use it. And it's this kind of perfect storm to me. That's the biggest area.
Yeah.
Mm.
So sharing the results, actually AI power threat was selected by 86%. And the second one was emerging technologies such as quantum or Internet of Things with 43%, followed by remote hybrid workforce and data privacy challenges, both by 29%. Nobody really selected regulatory shifts.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, I agree. I think AI is definitely front and center when it comes to, the type of disruption that is happening with a lot of the cyber operations today, because we see that a lot of companies today, they're behind the eight ball in some cases, right? They don't have the technology, perhaps, to replace your operational technology to manage your cybersecurity platforms or your cybersecurity operations with AI-enabled technologies. And the vendors that are providing these solutions, they typically end up, targeting mostly, the large enterprises, and again, even the middle-sized companies potentially exposed and are able to really, leverage those kind of technologies because of the cost. So, it is a pretty big issue, and for now, it's more about being able to provide, the proper defenses that you need to have from a from a operations perspective, processes, right? And having the proper frameworks to really manage your risk and put your risks. So, but anyway, so, we want to talk about, some of the gaps again that we see despite all the investments in cyber, because, cyber investments have grown up. I mean, everyone that gets attacked, right? Unfortunately, they end up spending more money, right? They find out the devastation or the problems that they have to deal with the cyber, and then they end up making additional investments in technology. And with almost half of the companies being, somehow attacked, someone get really, become victims of ransomware, the investments in cyber is increasing. Um, but at the same time, as they're increasing, you still see a lot of gaps, right? That we see across most businesses, which, all from your, still, issues with password management. It's incredible that we still have these issues, and we have a lot of organizations still not enforcing strong password policies, and having the technologies like, with the factor authentications, things like that. Patch management is obviously a big deal, despite the fact that there's a lot of automated technologies that can, do the patch management for you. You still go and find a lot of organizations with very exposed vulnerabilities due to their the lack of patch management practices. And I think we mentioned something about shadow IT, where you find, uh, organizations, including the implementation or the adoption of software as a service, where you have a small operation in your business that subscribe to a new technology or a new platform that they need to do uh, something with, and they becomes an unmanaged type of operation, which creates a security risk for most companies. But and then, a couple of things on incident response, which, it's again not going through that exercise of being prepared for an attack and having a true incident response plan. I cannot emphasize how important it is to be able to have those type of plans in place and practice even those plans as you see. But again, most organizations don't even have those type of things in writing, or even, not even the testing is not something that even comes across sometimes. So let me ask the panel about, despite all these investments and you see these gaps, I mean, where do you see that, do you agree with these gaps? Do you see any other things that you feel like are important to highlight here?
Um, yeah, I would say I definitely agree with these security gaps. One, there's Actually, all of them are way up there. One that I would say with the patch management program is not having, of course, that intel on 0 day or vulnerabilities that are being launched right away. If we don't have that ability to react quickly and patch those emerging threats, that's a wide open window that actors are taking care of or taking advantage of right now. The other one is shadow IT. I
Mhm.
was at an organization last week who was saying that we're good. All of our data is secure. It's in the cloud, but they didn't know where in the cloud. They didn't know who had access to what applications, who was moving data, and what the security practices of their partners were. So that was very concerning about not having that window into where is the data and how is it moving and being secured out there in the cloud. But all of
One
those are right on point. I just wanted to highlight those two quickly.
Yep.
And I want to add to Michael's point about the patch management. Threat intelligence program is something you don't see on most of the organizations, and it's very important because that's what allows you to understand, based on your industry, what's out there, so you can take action. And in some cases, it's even an automated process that you can block things, and then you can prioritize patching or do certain things. Threat intelligence is one of the most important programs, I think it is now these days, but it gets oversight. It gets put aside because it's a costly program. But there are tools that will help organizations to manage that program. And on the other one, I want to touch bases there is on the manpower, because we have organizations that may think, oh, now with AI coming, I can use AI to do everything on security. And the reality is that you still need both. You still need some AI and humans. I mean, both are important. For example, AI can automate payload creation, negotiation, even some threat escalations, but you still need the humans for do supervisory roles, or then guiding strategy, do the timing, or even final decisions. So the combination of things is what's important for us to hopefully address this type of attacks.
Yeah, and I mean, I'll second what my panelists have said, but I'll add two things that I think that are not technical that I think are huge gaps. I think one is people don't know what their assets are, right? Michael talked about not knowing where your stuff is in the cloud. People don't do a great job with asset management, either digital or physical. They don't know where their critical assets are. And then the second piece, and this is something that I focused a lot of my career on, is security people generally do not do a good job of connecting the technical cyber issues to the business impact, right? Business executives, simply put, care about three things: money coming in, money going out, and if something goes bad, who's going to get in trouble? And I think we can spend all the money we want, we can buy all the tools, but unless the business cares when the time comes to cut budget, that's where the money comes from, and that's much to our detriment. And then, of course, the security people are the ones who get blamed. And we need to move away from that sort of culture of blame and do a better job with governance and a better job of communication to kind of layer on top of these technical gaps that I agree with 100%.
Yeah.
And Jeffrey, one of the assets that you mentioned is data. Obviously, data is so important. Classification of data is critical for any organization. And a lot of the companies don't even do that. They have data all over the place, but they don't know which one is sensitive, which one is not, which one is critical, which one is not. And that becomes a major issue because you don't know where your important data is that in the event of an attack can be exposed.
Yeah.
Yes, I
Yeah. Go ahead, Michael.
um, Yes, I was going to say is that's where also with making that business case for how what an enabler IT security and cybersecurity is that our CISOs and our CIOs, our security managers need to get into those meetings, show up at those operational meetings, show up at the budget meetings, and really have that case as to the value that they deliver to the business will help also with getting the resources and funding to have a proper and robust security program.
100% agree with that. I mean, I think, security is not really a technical issue anymore. It used to be back, let's say 10 years, 15, 20 years ago. cybersecurity was really in the IT side of things, right? It was all IT guys, trying to protect the organization with no real leadership or bringing that up, other than making sure backups were done correctly and things like that. But now it's more of it's a true business issue that is being discussed in many boards of directors and becoming a top of mind for most of the CIOs. So it's super important. I agree, 100% agree that that discussion of cybersecurity, you know, with the business has to come, hand in hand. It cannot be just a separate type of thing. And really going so now that we talked a little bit about these gaps, I want to talk about, kind of move our attention to what is good, right? What we should be, what looks good, right? What companies should be doing or practices they should employ, um, you know, and I think in general, as a whole, right, to really do something well, you always got to have a program, right? I mean, we obviously come from the consulting background, and there's some really strong frameworks out there, like the ISO standard and the NIST framework and things like that, which are incredible amount of information. And sees a tremendous amount of resources to help organization define a strong security framework with the proper practices. And we're going to talk a little bit in the next slide about these frameworks, what's good, what doesn't look good, what kind of things you should be looking for. But from a definition of a program, you got to start with that. And as you start with your programs, you always have to have, somehow a way to measure the progress you're making about the implementation or the maturity of your program. So that's something that, constantly needs to happen. And it's super important to have a well-defined program. As we mentioned before, I mean, the incident response and having the proactive detection on what is going on is absolutely key. It goes along with your operations to make sure you have eyes on glass or eyes on the whole operation 24 by 7, because these attacks are nonstop. I mean, you just cannot have, it's incredible to me and to us sometimes when we go into, again, organizations and seeing that they don't really have 24 by 7. What they still have is basically someone getting paged or if they use pagers anymore, or notified that something is going on in the middle of the night, or they have these folks in call. And this is a lot about the mid-sized companies in general. I mean, large organizations, obviously, they already have their operations in 24 by 7. But, again, the threat actors are looking for vulnerabilities and companies that are exposed, and they get to, attack this type of organizations that don't have the eyes on glasses, in a 24 by 7 basis. And then obviously having the right team, right? I mean, that goes without saying. I mean, there's still a shortage on skilled labor, but having the right team and a trained team, not just having the number amount of people. It's like Jeffrey mentioned, you can spend a lot of money on your technologies and perhaps have the right teams, but you got to have really a trained team, right? They're constantly trained on the latest technologies, the latest hacks, what's going on in the industry. Super important to have that, as we've seen and we discussed. So based on this, I mean, I wanted to ask the panel again, in terms of, you know, having these practices, you feel like, which one do you think perhaps would be the most important from your perspective? If anyone to have limited resources to implement, let's say, some practices, and you come in, you say, I think you should focus perhaps on this one or the other, or perhaps something that is not in this slide. Let me see, anyone wants to step in?
On my case, I manage security operations. I think all of them are as important. It's a combination of things, and I cannot just say having the right incident response plan or the right tools or the of the right team is a piece or component. All of them have to be in place for companies to be protected. Now, as we were just talking before, small, mid-sized companies may not be able to afford some of these components, and that's when, in a lot of the cases, that's what they approach. In my case, ourselves for to provide and assist on those type of areas, so we can provide a more affordable type of service for what they need.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Agree totally, Jose. like you said, it's hard to pinpoint, but without the right team, I think, it's difficult to put the other pieces in place. We need to have, that motivation, the dedication, also the climate of everyone working together to build on to the rest of the program as well. So those, they're all very key. The other thing I wanted to touch on was 24/7 operations. You mentioned a smaller organization, they don't have these people always available. But if you have if you have that set of eyes that's looking on the outside, that could be the difference between intercepting an attack or catastrophe, because our adversaries are going to attack on the weekend, at night, and over the holidays. They know when Christmas is, they know when New Year's is. So on those days, the holiday weekends, that's when we're most vulnerable. So definitely keeping out a plan. What are we going to do over those periods where we may have a gap in our coverage? How are we protecting ourselves is key.
Right. And I'm a big believer. I know this kind of sounds old, but people, process, and tools, right? That is the core of all of the things we do. I think we need to start with the process and then supplement with people and then decide what tools you need. And for those of you out there that are in small and medium-sized businesses and mid-sized enterprises, process doesn't have to be a 5,000 page manual. It can
Right.
be a simple set of 4 or 5 things that you do in a consistent way. And I think that's really important. Process is not exciting, it's not sexy, but it's really important because it leads to the defensibility thing. Here's why we made the decisions we made. And that's really, really critical. The other thing I think that's missing from a lot of these discussions is it's not just us anymore. It's about all of our partners, right? It's about our vendors, our third parties, our suppliers. And we, to quote poet John Donne, no organization is an island unto itself. And we need to understand, especially in the age of cloud, especially for smaller organizations that are not doing anything in-house, we need to understand the security posture of the people we do business with and who we depend on. And I think that, I've been doing this a long time. I believe that that's the hardest problem I've ever seen, because there are so many moving parts and so many different stakeholders that are involved. And I always jokingly say to audiences, I do a lot of stage work, you guys may be perfect at defending yourself against ransomware. You're not, but I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt. But I can tell you, your partners, your vendors, your suppliers, they definitely are not. And the
Okay.
bad actors are going to come at you through them.
Through
And
them.
I think that's really something that we need to consider as well. And it covers all of these things. So it's not a separate thing.
That's an excellent point, Jeffrey. I think the third party risk management is essential, and is really most of the time is overlooked, because you still have a lot of organizations trying to tackle the basic things sometimes of cybersecurity, especially for a mid-sized company or a small mid-sized company. But those kind of things, those kind of practices, again, is what will be defined in a security program, right? I mean, if you look at one of the frameworks and the standards out there, that's a specific practice and controls associated with third-party management, third-party risk management, that should be implemented, right? I mean, there's some basic things that they have to do first, or if in cases, as you mentioned, that you have, your own organization that has so many different third parties that you're working with, um, that may become a priority, right? So it's all obviously driven by business needs, but it is increasingly, it is growing so complex, the whole third party, you know, landscape, right, for an organization. So especially with cloud and services like that, that you have connected into your infrastructure. So yeah, so with that, we can talk about a little bit about, what this look like, in a practical way. So we have a basic framework, if you want to put it from a visual perspective, where you have very specific practices that lead your security services or security operations, starting with incident management, where you have your events and all the threat detection that you have there. the correlation and the different things. And some of the things that you see here is basically the type of services you will have, the type of technologies perhaps you should be looking for, and the type of compliance and frameworks that you need to have to be able to deliver these services efficiently. So, for example, as Jose mentioned, threat intelligence is something that we are seeing that is becoming very important for most organizations to have. So with threat intelligence, you'll be able to understand what's going on out there, right? What's happening out there, because there's so many services out there providing information about the threat actors, what they're doing, who's moving, how they're doing their attacks, what industries they're targeting. So you want to have, if you're in let's say in the automotive industry, you want to have that kind of information ahead of time, so you can be prepared to react and protect yourselves. So threat intelligence it's a very I wouldn't say up and coming because it's been there for a while, but it's becoming very much top of mind as having
Right.
good security operations, right?
And
Um, Anybody
And
say?
by the way, and Alvaro, sorry to interrupt, but yeah, those three buckets that we see there for the first of the incident management, incident response. I mean, this is all about monitoring and do the right response of any alerts, events that we get. And then obviously we complement with threat intelligence and vulnerability management. But at the end, there's a series of tools on the bottom on the yellow boxes that are not limited to that. This is just an example of what we think is best practices, and there are other tools actually that will help with complement these services, but those are the more critical tools that a lot of the organizations, mostly large organizations, are using on the different areas to protect themselves on the different buckets. We do see that, as we've been talking throughout this webinar, that small medium companies may not be able to afford some of these tools, not only because of the cost, it's because they don't have the right people or right number of resources to manage these tools. It's as simple as that. And they don't have the eyes 24 by 7 or these type of things, or configuring or maintaining the tools. That's another big thing. But at the end, this is a guidance of what a framework from a security perspective should look like, and for organizations to implement and run the security operations.
Yeah, thanks, Jose. Yeah, and this is what we use here to help us understand, how to put together an operation the right way, right? So we bring the service management practices for like incident management or change management, things like that. They're your typical service management practices. And then we bring controls to help with the actual oversight of the services and how they're being delivered. And then you have your analytics that give you the visibility over what is really happening in the operation, because you really need someone to analyze the amount of data, because there's a lot of data that is being generated, to be able to visually quickly understand patterns and things like that. And then last but not least, you have to have your automation programs where you basically are introducing technologies to help you automate the workloads that you have to deal with in something like this. So again, it is more to implement something at scale, but you can start with some of these basic practices that you see here. Um, so we got a few more minutes, but I think we have
I
another
think,
polling question.
Alvaro, given
Yeah,
how sure we are on time, we should just skip the polling questions and go
yeah.
through the rest and talk about the assessment as well.
Yeah, I think maybe we need to jump to that piece
To the assessment piece, you want us to jump to the assessment?
What's the
because we have
next one?
five more minutes on the webinar.
Yeah, we have 5 more minutes, but yeah, I think we should do that. And I apologize for running a little bit of time, but this is such an interesting subject. There's so much to discuss, and we wanted to perhaps end the webinar by telling you a little bit about an offering that we have to understand kind of what you are, if you're interested on really looking at um, your security posture. We'll be happy to provide you with an assessment that we would do, basically asking some basic questions. We give you some questions before, obviously, meeting with you, and then we will have using the technology from Black Kite to help us understand your risks using the scanning technology, and it gives you a very good comprehensive I would say it's very comprehensive and very interesting reports to give you that kind of information. So if you're interested in that, we'll be again very happy to help you uh, with that with the assessment. No, um,
Yeah.
so um, Fabi, you wanna put
No,
out?
I was just thinking that if there are some, final remarks or lessons learned from Michael and Jeffrey and Jose before we close up, and maybe Jose, we can also spend a few couple of minutes on the MSP slide. Um,
Yeah, so yeah, we have a couple of more minutes. So, I don't know if we have any final remarks like Fabiana mentioned from any of you. Let's start with maybe with Michael.
Okay, yes. Couple closing remarks. Definitely support the recommendation for an assessment by an organization to get that outside perspective. Where are we at in our program? Where are our most critical gaps? What is the risk from an outside professional's expert? Is something that CISA strongly supports and we recommend. The other thing is, to keep that collaboration going with our partners, getting that intel source, our vendors, knowing what's in our environment, what the known exploits are, and then just being able to react quickly and be able to protect those key assets in your organization. And by working together, sharing that information, we can become better and more secure in our environments.
Thank you. Excellent.
Yep.
Thank you.
And I'll just close with something very simple. I think we need to start focusing on the things that are the biggest, the most impactful. Everybody tends to be sort of enamored with the cool blinky lights and the kind of new technology. Most organizations, as the team pointed out, we're not doing basic blocking and tackling, right? We don't know where our stuff is. We don't know who our people are. We're not getting patches out. We don't know what our risk exposures are. Let's focus on those things. That gives us a good base to build off of. And I think that's what we need to think more of.
Thank you. Jose?
And I
Yeah.
think Jeff, you made a great point in terms of like starting to also involve the business and the operations. And I think the CFO and the office of the CFO is a great partner for the security and the IT team, since as you said, naturally they typically struggle on positioning business cases and how to talk the business language. That if a lot of the problem that security teams are having is how to prove the budget and the fact that they need the money and the risk is there, I feel that the financial teams are very well positioned to build that story with the IT teams, right? And that's why they need to collaborate so much. But yeah, I think that those were a couple of the questions that I didn't have time. One of the questions was related to that, like what advice would you give in order to get the budget and build the business case to get it approved by the CFO?
Okay.
But
Um,
yes,
Go ahead, Fabi.
no, I was just gonna say, Alvaro, that basically if anyone is interested in getting a copy of the presentation, you can send us an email and we'll be happy to share a copy of the recording of the presentation, the Black Eye report as well. If the barcode didn't work or anything, we'll be happy to share it separately. And definitely the security assessment complementary that we're offering, you would be surprised with how the regardless of the maturity and size of the clients that we work with, all of the opportunities that always come up as part of the assessment. I think, as Jeffrey said, like even if you feel that you have a great posture, there's always something to work towards. And I would say definitely take advantage of it because it's free. Yeah, I wasn't sure, Alvaro, if there's anything else you wanted to say before we close.
No, I think it was really great to hear everyone's perspective. I hope there were some takeaways that you got from our discussion today. And if you're interested in further discussions, we'll be more than happy to have a phone conversation about your particular situation or discuss any of the slides. If you're interested on having that type of discussion, we'll be more than happy to do that. So very much appreciate everybody's time today. And with that, we can close it up and wish you
Yeah.
all a very good rest of the week. All right.
Thank you, team. Thank you, Michael, Jeffrey. Have a good week.
Thank you.
Michael,
Thank you, everyone.
appreciate it.
Appreciate it.